How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kufay, Daf 105 of Masechta Menachos, friends. On Daf 105 of Masechta Menachos, we begin the final chapter of Masechta Menachos, chapter 13. Hare Olai Isaron. I'd say it's a pretty technical daf, I would say. That is what I would say. I'd say it's pretty technical. Somebody says, I'm going to bring this kind of mincha, that kind of a mincha. What kind does he bring? If he's vague, what do we determine? What does he do? That's kind of the vibe of this daf. So let's jump in. Friends, we begin on daf Kuf Dalid Omid Beis at the new parak. Says the Mishnah, Olai Isaron. If a person says, I'm going to bring an Isaron, Yavi Echot, so he brings one korban mincha. Esronis, if he says, I'm going to bring plural Isarons, well, what's the minimum of plural? 2. Yavi Shnaim, bring 2 korban minachis. Peirashti, if he said, Shish, I had said I'm going to bring a certain number of Isarons, but I can't remember what that number was. I don't remember what I specified. Yavi Shishim Isaron. The suggestion is bring 60 Isarons. To bring 60 Isarons, because as we learned, was it yesterday or the day before, that the maximum that can fit into one kli, into one vessel, into one bowl, into one vessel, is 60 Isarons in one kli. And so we kind of max it out and say bring the max for one vessel, and we'll assume that somewhere in that 60 is the nether. Meaning, so if he says, I'm going to bring 15 Isarons, but he can't remember what that number was, 15, 5, 20, 30, whatever it was, bring 60. 60 includes 15. He brought his 15. That works. Now, when a person says, I'm going to bring a korban mincha, Yavi ezo sheyirtze, bring whatever kind of mincha you like. Minchas soles, sure. Minchas machvas, great. Marcheshes, maifisanur, chalis, rikikin, whatever you like, right? Of those 5, right? The 5 being minchas soles, minchas marcheshes, minchas machvas, minchas maifisanur of chalas, and minchas maifisanur of rikikin. Those 5. Of those 5, choose whichever you like. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda, Yavi minchas soles. Rabbi Yehuda says, no. When you say, I'm going to bring a korban mincha, you bring a minchas soles. Shehi miyuchedes sheba menachos. The reason being that minchas soles is the special one. Ooh, what does that mean? It's the special one. Don't you worry, the Gemara will let you know. Mincha, mincha, if a person says a mincha, or a type of mincha, type being soles, machvas, macheshes, etc. Yavi achas, bring one mincha. Minachis, person says plural. Min minachis, or a type of minachis. Yavi shtaim, bring 2. I believe Rashi says 2 of one type, right? What does Rashi say? Min minachis, yavi shtei minachos, min echad. Yeah, that's what Rashi says, right? So when he says min minachis, since minachis is plural, but min is singular, so you bring 2 minachos, but of one type. Yavi shtayim. Oh no, I just said yavi shtayim. Okay, minachos yavi shtayim. Peirashti, if he says, I said that I'm going to bring a. He says, I know that I had said I'm going to bring a minchas, and that's where I forget. Was it a minchas soles, marcheshes? I can't remember. I specified that I'm going to bring one of them, but I can't remember which type. In that case, bring all 5. I don't know. Did I commit to achsoles, machvas, macheshes, maifisanur chalos, rikikin? Bring all 5, and that way you covered all bases. Is that what we say? Yeah, I think so, right? Cover all your bases. I think that's a phrase. So, assuming that's a phrase, he covers all his bases. And if he, let's say it was marcheshes that he said, well, he brought a marcheshes among the others as well, and whatever he didn't commit to will just be nidavas. Peirashti mincha shel esronim. He says, well, I said a mincha shel esronim. I said I'm going to bring a mincha of X number of isarons but gosh, I can't remember what that number was. Veni Yodea Kama Perashti, I don't know how many Isaruns I said that I'm going to bring. Yavi Shishim Isarun. So bring 60 Isaruns. Now you might be wondering, what's the difference between the Resha, right? What did the Resha say? Perashti Veni Yodea Ma Perashti Yavi Shishim Isarun. Bring 60 Isaruns. So here, because he says, we're going to see in Nafkamina, and that Rebbe argues on this one, that here he's saying Perashti Mincha Shel Esronim, whereas in the Resha he just said Perashti. I didn't say Mincha Shel Esronim. Because he says Mincha Shel Esronim, it's mashma in a kli, which changes sense. So he said, I'm going to bring X number of Isarons in a vessel. So the Tanakama says, just bring 60 Isarons in a vessel, and whatever that number was, say it was, let's say 3. He said, I'm going to bring three Isarons in a vessel. So he brought 60 Isarons in a vessel. 60 includes 3. Memele, he brought 3 in a vessel. Rebbe Omer says, Rebbe Yomi Menachos shel esronis me'echad v'ad shishim. Rebbe says no. If he specified that he is going to bring, if what he said was, he can't remember what he said, but if what he said was he's going to bring three, he's going to bring 3 Isarons in a vessel, he must bring a vessel that has only 3 Isarons in it. You can't bring a vessel with 60 Isarons in it. He said he's going to bring a vessel that has 3 Isarons in it. He has to bring a vessel with 3 Isarons. But how is he supposed to do that? He doesn't remember what he said. Well, he brings a kli with 1 Isaron in it, a kli with 2 Esronim in it, a kli with 3 Esronim, another kli with 4 Esronim, 5, etc. He's got to bring 60 vessels with menachis in them, each menacha having 1 more Isaron than the previous. That is a lot of Isarons. Maybe that was some kind of incentive to remember what you committed to. But anyways, so says Rebbe, he has to bring what he committed to bring, and therefore, in order to make sure he covers his bases, he has to bring 60 menachis in 60 vessels, with each one having a higher number of Isarons, up till 60 Isarons. I'm going to have a shluck of tea, and we'll go weiter. Says the Gemara that when the Mishnah says, when the Mishnah says that when he says, I'm going to bring an Isaron, he's got to bring an Isaron, Pshita. He said he's going to bring an Isaron, he's got to bring an Isaron. Makes sense. Esronis Yabishtayim Etzrichale. Well, you're right. I'm going to bring an Isaron, and he's got to bring an Isaron, you're right. That's obvious. But we wrote that because the next thing that we wanted to say is important, which is, when he says Esronim, he's got to bring 2 Isarons. Right? Then when he says Shtai, where am I? So Esronos Yavi Shtaim. That's what we need to teach. But Hanami Pshita, but that's also obvious. Miut Esronos Shtaim. After all, the minimum of Esronos is 2. So bring the minimum. So the Gemara answers, you have to add the word Perashti. Perashti, it's Trichale. Well, we needed to teach about Perashti. When he had said that I had specified a number, but I can't remember what that number is, and he brings 60 Isarons, so that's what the Mishnah really had to teach. So along the way, we also talked about Isaron and Esronos. Perashti v'nudei ma perashti of shishim Isaron. So the Mishnah had said that if he says, I had specified a certain number of Isarons, but I can't remember what that number was, so you bring 60. Montana, whose opinion is that? Chizkiah says, Chizkiah delo Rebbe. Clearly, it's not like Rebbe. Rebbe, Ha'amar Yovi Menachos shel Esronos me'echad v'ad shishim. Rebbe had said at the end of the Mishnah that you would bring 60 menachis in 60 vessels, with one, each one having incrementally more Isarons. The first mincha has 1 Isaron, the second one has 2, the third one has 3, etc. So clearly, the rate where we're saying that you'll just bring a mincha of 60 Isarons can't be Rebbe, because Rebbe would say you bring 60 menachos, each with more and more Isronos in them. Rabbi Yechanan argues with Chizkiah, and he says, Afilu tema Rebbe. You can even say that it is Rebbe. Be'omer perashti Esronis avalo kavaitim bichli. You see, the difference between the Resha and the Seifa is that in the Resha, he didn't say specifically that he's going to bring a certain number in a kli. He just said, I'm going to bring a certain number. He says, I'm going to bring 15 isarons, let's say. But he didn't say, I'm going to bring 50 isarons in one vessel. In the Seifa, that's what he said. In the Seifa, essentially, he said, I'm going to bring 15 isarons in one vessel, but he didn't remember what that number was. So he's got to bring 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got to bring every single number combination in a vessel. Right? So first, Mincha is 1 isaron in a vessel, then 2 isaronos in a vessel, etc., etc. Here he's not committing to a vessel, he's just committing to a number, 15 isarons. And therefore, in this case, you can even say it's Rebbe. And what you would say, what does it mean, 60 isarons? Demaisi shisin esronis b'shisin money. You'll bring 60 isarons in 60 vessels, each one just containing 1 isaron, however. And the reason for that is, just in case he had specified that he's going to be bringing, just in case he had said that he's going to be bringing it in multiple vessels, so then you have the multiple vessels. And so you bring 60 isarons, and that way, whatever the number was, let's say he said he's going to be, let's say the number was 3. So he brought 3, and whether he said that he would bring them, in separate vessels or just that he was going to bring them, either way, you have those 3 isarons that you committed to bringing, and that would work. So says Rabbi Yochanan, you can even say that that is Rebbe as well. Harei olai mincha yavi ezu she yirtze. So the Gemara wants to know, what does Rabbi Yehuda mean by the special one, right? So the Mishnah had said that if he just says, I'm going to bring a mincha, so he can bring whatever he likes. You said, I'm going to bring a mincha. Choose a type. You want to bring a mincha soles, givaldig, minchas marcheshes, whatever. Great. Rabbi Yehuda says, what does he say? Rabbi Yehuda yavi mincha soles. No, you have to bring a mincha soles, she'im yuchedesh b'menachos. That's the special one. What's so special? What we learn in a Brisa, that what's so special about the mincha soles is that it's the first one. If you open up a book of Leviticus, chapter 2, and you start reading about the meal offerings, what's the first one? Mincha soles. That's what makes it so special. If something being first makes it so special, no. If you look at the very first chapter of the book of Leviticus, and it's talking about korban olas, the first one, im ola korbanu min abakar, I think the pasuk says, the first korban ola that is talked about, that is discussed in the book of Leviticus, is the cow ola. So therefore, if a person says, I'm going to bring a korban ola, does he have to bring a cow according to Rabbi Yehuda? Minatson yavi keves. If he says, I'm going to bring a ola from the flock, does that mean Mameli he's got to bring an ola of sheep? Since it says, I don't remember exactly what it says, im minatson korbano mina kvasim o mina izim, or something like that. I think that is what it's referring to, that it says flock, and then it says sheep, and then it says goats. So if you said that I'm going to bring a mincha from, an ola from the flock, should you have to bring from sheep, because it's written first? Mina oif, from birds. Yavi torim holufasach bo hakosav tchila. Should he bring doves, right? Young doves, turtle doves. I think the torim are the turtle doves. Bnei Yon, I think, are the young doves. So should he bring a turtle dove, since it talks about turtle doves first? So Allah mitnan, if that's the case, one second, we have a Mishnah on Daf Kuf Zayin. We'll learn about it in 2 days from now. Harei olai ola yavi keves. According to Tanakama, a person says, I'm going to bring a korban ola. So I would expect, based on Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion would be, you should bring a cow, right? But the Tanakama says, bring a sheep. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer Toro ben Yaina. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, bring a dove, a turtle dove or a young dove. Below Palag Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't argue there, implying that he agrees. Sure. You say you want to bring an ola? Bring a sheep. What, shouldn't you have to bring a cow? If we're saying that what's important is whatever's written first. Okay, so clearly that isn't what makes the mincha soles so special. It's not simply that it was written about first. Ella, what makes the mincha soles so special? Delays le shem levoy. The answer is because it doesn't have a descriptor, right? If I say I'm a korban mincha, it would not be referring to minchas machmas, because I'd have to say minchas machvas, or minchas marcheshes, or minchas maifasonim. If I was bringing any of those kinds of menachos, I'd have to say that. I'd have to say machvas, marcheshes, maifasonim. But masha'en came by mincha solis. If I say I'm going to bring a mincha, that could be a reference to mincha solis. And therefore, since mincha solis is the only type of mincha that if you just say mincha, it means mincha solis, that's what makes it special. And that is why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, a person says, I'm going to bring a mincha, it's a minchas solis. Now, frag the Gemara, but 1 second, then what do we do about the brisa though? Because we do, after all, have that brisa that says that what's special about it is that it's the first mincha to be written about. Ka'amar. So this is what it's saying. It's a little bit funny, this next thing. But Ezu mincha, what the brisa is saying, Ezu mincha miyuchedes sheba menachos, what is the most unique mincha, the leis leishem livui, that does not have a descriptor along with it, Zosha pasach ba'akasav tchila, the one that was written about first in the Chumash. Pshita minchas solis ka'amar. Okay, but why do we need this? Rabbi Yehuda already says in the Mishnah, minchas solis, well, since it's special, why do I need this? And it's the first one that I talked about. Why is that important? Siman Abalma. It's just a way, it's a sign, it's a helpful way to remember things. If you wanted to remember, we learned Masechta Menachos, Daf Kuf Daled, Babble on Talmud. There was that shita of Rabbi Yehuda, right? That when a person says you bring a mincha, you bring it from soles because it's special. Well, no. So there was that shita of Rabbi Yehuda about it being a special. Which one was it? It was the one that was written about first in the Chumash, the minchas soles. Okay, it'll help you remember it. Let's see. Let's wait a few months, and let's see. Let's see if it works. Maybe it will. Mincha, mina mincha v'chulei. Okay. So we said if a person says a mincha or a type of mincha, so you bring a mincha, whatever you like, machvas, macheshes. Boy Rab Pope asks akashe. Mine mincha mau. This is the question that we are going to be working with for the next 20 lines or so. If a person says he's going to be bringing mine mincha, what does he do? Kevan to amr mine tartik amr. Since he said mine, which is plural, so maybe he's saying I'm going to bring 2 menachos. Umay mincha. So when he says mine mincha is singular, however. Duchule menachos nami mincha mikayin dichsiv is also mincha. Well, if you look in the 6th chapter of the book of Leviticus, verse 7, right? Of course, Menachos I talked about in Sefer Vayikra in Perek Beis as well as in Perek Vav. Now, if you look in Perek Vav, it says V'zois Torah mincha. This is the Torah of the mincha. And when it says this is the Torah of the mincha, it's not referring to any particular mincha. It's talking about Menachos. So therefore, I can argue when it says mine mincha. So mine is plural, and mincha, even though it seems to be singular, it could actually be a reference to multiple, to all the types of menachos, and therefore, maybe the point is you should have to bring, in that case, 2 menachos. O Dilma, because mine, mincha, right, it's all plural. O Dilma came into Amr mincha, or maybe no, when it says mincha, mine, mincha is singular, let's say. Chado mincha kama, he's talking about he's going to bring 1 mincha. Umay mine mincha, so what is mine, plural? This is what he's saying. Mimine mincha chad mincha olay. No, maybe what he's saying is that mine mincha. I'm going to bring 1 mincha mine from the types of menachos. There are 5 types of menachos that I could potentially be bringing a mincha from. I'm going to bring 1 mincha of one of the 5 types of menachos. So, friends, what do you say? Mine mincha, 2 menachos, 1 minacha. After 105 dafs of menachos, I'm calling them menachas. A menacha. Toshma, come in here. Mincha, mincha. Well, our Mishnah says, mincha, mincha, yavi achas. You bring 1 mincha. Ha, mine mincha, shtayim. Well, right, so mincha, mincha, that's when you bring 1. Mine mincha, that's going to be 2. Ema Seifa, but 1 second, it also says in the Mishnah, Menachis, min Menachis, Yavishtayim. When it says Menachis, plural, that's when you bring 2. Hamine Mincha, Chada, maybe Mine Mincha, though, is just 1. We can't prove anything from the Mishnah. Tashma, come in here. Min Menachis, Olai. So he says, Min Menachis. Yavishtay Menachis, Min Echad. So Min Menachis, you bring 2 minchas from 1 type. So 2 machvases or whatever. Ha mine mincha, does that not imply that mine mincha chada? Right, mine mincha would be 1, right? When we say min menachis, that's 2. So mine mincha, maybe that's 1. But dilma ha mine mincha, maybe shtei menachos mishtei minim. Wait, but maybe mine mincha means that you bring mine mincha, 2 types of, right, 2 menachos of 2 types, right? Mine, right? 2 menachos of 2 types, maybe. But 1 second, we learn in a brisa, min menachis, olai, maybe shtei menachos, min echad. Okay, so when he says min menachis, so 2 menachis, 1 min, 1 type. Mine menachis, olai. If he says mine menachis, so mine and menachis are both plural. Maybe shtei menachis, mishnei minin. So he brings 2 types of menachis, or 2 menachis from 2 types. Where am I? Where am I? Mine menachas alai maybe shtei menachas mishnei minim. Fine. Ha mine mincha. Okay, so we learned about min menachis. We learned about mine menachis, but min menachis. No, but mine mincha chada. Okay, maybe that would be just 1. Sheesh. But Dilma Amani Reb Shimoni. Sheesh. Okay, so again, so we said min menachis is 2 menachis of 1 type. Mine menachis is 2 menachis of 2 types. We want to argue that mine mincha, which is our question, would be 1 mincha. But maybe though, mine mincha being 1 mincha, maybe is only according to Reb Shimon. Why? What does Reb Shimon say? Reb Shimon's opinion, if you remember from about a month ago, Reb Shimon's opinion is that when it comes to minchas mai fesaner, and this is going to be important for the rest of the daf, it's not difficult or anything, it's just a reminder of what his opinion is by minchas mai fesaner. So of course by minchas mai fesaner, a baked mincha, it could be either 10 chalas or 10 rakikin. The question is, can you bring 5 chalas and 5 rakikin instead? Instead of 10 chalas or 10 rakikin, maybe you could do 5 and 5. A split. Reb Shimon says you can. Reb Shimon says you could do that. You could bring a minchas mai fesaner that is 5 chalas and 5 rakikin. So we see that according to Reb Shimon, there's a possibility of having 1 mincha that's 2 types. So mine mincha, you can have 1 mincha that's 2 types. A mai fesaner in which 5 of the loaves are chalas and 5s are rakikin. So maybe davka, if you're going to say that mine mincha is 1 mincha, maybe that's davka according to Reb Shimon, the Omer, who says mechza chalas v'mechza rakikin yavi. If you want to bring 5 chalas and 5 rakikin, that is fine. Umay mine mincha, and what does it mean? Mine mincha, mincha de isba tre mine, 1 mincha that has 2 types, chalas and rakikin. Aval chabonon, but the rabbis who argue with Reb Shimon and say that that is not a possibility, you can't bring 1 min, right? By my fesaner, you can't bring 5 chalas and 5 rakikin. So there isn't this possibility of 1 mincha that has 2 types in it. So Rabbanan da'ami mechza chalas v'mechza rakikin lo yavi, that you can't bring half chalas and half rakikin. So maybe shtei menachos mishnei minin. Well, the rabbis would argue and say you'd have to bring 2 menachos of 2 types. So therefore, to say that mincha would be just one mincha, that could be only according to Reb Shimon, but the rabbis would argue. So, okay, I guess at most mincha would be 1 mincha according to Reb Shimon, but according to the rabbis it would have to be 2 menachos. I imagine probably of 2 types. Okay, fine, very exciting stuff. Now the Mishnah said, "Peirashti v'nudei ma peirashti ovi chamishasun." So the Mishnah had said that if a person says, I had said I'm going to bring a particular type of mincha, but I can't remember what that particular type was. Was it a solis? Was it a machvas? Don't remember. So you say bring all 5. Mantana, whose opinion is that? Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Rabbi Yirmiyah delok Reb Shimon. I'll tell you whose opinion it's not. it's not Reb Shimon's. The opinion of Reb Shimon that we just saw a second ago, that when it comes to Minchas Mai Fesoner, you could bring 5 chalas and 5 rakikin, and we're going to assume now also that not only 5 chalas and 5 rakikins, you could bring 9 chalas and 1 rakikin, 2 chalas and 8 rakikin, whatever. They just have to add up to 10, but you can have any combination. So therefore, that the Mishnah that says you bring 5 types of menachos, one of each type essentially, cannot be like Reb Shimon. The Reb Shimon, because if it is Reb Shimon, came into Omar Yavi, came into Omar Mechza Chalus and Mechza Rakikin Yavi. Since Reb Shimon says you can bring a combination of Chalas and Rakikin, again 5 and 5, 4 and 6, whatever it is. So inami soverla Reb Yehuda de Amr kol menachos bos eser ikel sapuka be'arba eser menachos. And there's a note here that also mentions Reb Meir's opinion. We saw a machlokes. I don't remember on what daf, but we saw a machlokes. One of the earlier dafs, maybe in some Gimel or something. We saw a machlokes about when it comes to menachos, how many loaves are brought with the menachos. Reb Yehuda says every mincha has 10 loaves. So a minchas, marcheshes, machvas, you're going to be bringing 10 loaves. Reb Meir says 12 loaves. Meir says 12 loaves. So the machlok is about 10 loaves, 12 loaves. So now the shaila is, what does Reb Shimon hold? The assumption is he holds either 10 loaves or 12 loaves. So now the thing is, so we're saying if it was Reb Shimon, so how many? So we said, okay, you said I'm going to bring a korban mincha. You don't remember? Did you say mincha soles, machbas, machesh? You can't remember. So the mincha says bring one of each of the 5. Bring 5 menachos, one of each type. The Gemara is pointing out that can't be Reb Shimon's opinion, because Reb Shimon, since he says that when it comes to minchas my fesoner, you can have all sorts of different combinations. You'd have to bring, according to Reb Yehuda, who says that each mincha would come with 10 loaves, you'd have to bring 14 types of menachos. How come? Well, let's count. Everybody, if you have your right hand handy, make a fist. And each time we say another type of mincha, put up a finger. And then just keep on putting up fingers over and over until we run out. So now, minchas soles, minchas marcheshes, minchas machvas. So far that's 3 types of menachos he's going to have to bring. Minchas, my fesoner, chalas with 10 chalas. Mincha, my fesoner, rakikin with 10 rakikin. So far up to 10. And now, there's the possibility of a minchas, my fesoner with 9 chalas and 1 rakikin. There's a possibility of 8 chalas and 2 rakikin, 7 chalas and 3 rakikin, 6 and 4, 5 and 5, 4 and 6, 3 and 7, 2 and 8, 1 and 9. That's 14. So there, and if you're according to a mayor who says that there is 12, so then there's also the possibility of, I guess, 11 and 1 and 1 and 11. I imagine it's probably the missing one. But anyways, right, so there's another 2. So says Rabbi Yirmiyah, our Mishnah that says if you're not sure which type you specified, you know that you specified a type, you can't remember which one. Our Mishnah says, okay, so bring 5. That can't be Rabbi Shimon, because since Rabbi Shimon says when it comes to my fesoner, you can have all sorts of different combinations. You're going to have to bring a separate mincha with each of those combinations. So if we say like Rabbi Yehuda that there are 10 loaves for each mincha, well then you're going to have to bring 14 options. And if like Rabbi Meir that there's 12 loaves, so then 16 options. Okay. Abaye Omar afilu tema Rab Shimon. So says Abaye, and this basically is going to take us to the rest of the daf, that you can even say it's take Reb Shimon, because Shamina leilu Reb Shimon do Amar Maisi Umasni. Because we see that Reb Shimon's opinion is, as we'll see in a second, you can bring the 5 menachos. Well, his opinion is not going to be in the context of menachos, but we're going to see based on his opinion, what Reb Shimon would allow you to do is to bring the 5 menachos, soles, machvas, macheshes, ma'afason, chalas, rakikin, and you can make a tanai. You could say, look, it's possible that I pledge to bring a minchas my fesoner with some kind of custom number of chalas and amount of chalas and rakikin, And you can say, if that was the case, well then, let's see. Well, no, so if that was the case, so then, okay, I don't remember if we specified, so I'll say it now. If the Gemara says it, then great. But basically what it'll do is, what's the concern, right? Meaning, if it's a mincha solis, okay, so he's bringing a mincha solis, bringing a machav, bringing a cheshes. The complexity comes around the minchas ma'ifas, because there are two types of minchas ma'ifas, chalas, rakikin. And Reb Shimon says you can also bring any sort of combination of chalas and rakikin. So Abaye says, look, according to Reb Shimon, who says that you could bring a korban out and make a tanai, so what you could do is and say, look, bring those 5 types of menachos and say, I don't remember what type of mincha I said I was going to bring, I committed to. If I said soles, well, I'm bringing a soles. Marcheshes, bring a marches. Machvas, bring a machas. If I said that I'm going to bring a minchas ma'ifas of chalas, I'm bringing the ma'ifas of chalas. Of rakikin, I'm bringing the ma'ifas of makikin. And if I had made a custom amount of chalas and rakikin, well then, consider that custom amount. So kilu, if I had said 7 chalas and 3 rakikin, well, my mincha ma'ifas with 10 chalas, consider 7 of those chalas to be for my neder, and the other 3 will be a nedava. And of my rakikin, consider 3 of them to be for a neder, and the rest of the 7 to be for a nedava. So basically, you can make that tanai and say, look, I'm bringing all of the different types that we need here, and Hashem, just in case I had made a custom amount of a custom ma'ifas with a custom amount of chalas to rakikin, consider the custom amount to be the neder, and all remaining chalas from the chalas and all the remaining loaves from the challah and rakikin should be considered a nedaveh. So again, Abaye Omar says, Abaye afilu tema Reb Shimon, even if you say it's Reb Shimon, Shamini le Reb Shimon de Omar, Maisi umasne. The Reb Shimon also, you could bring just the 5 types of menachos, and you could make the tanai that I just described. Desanya, how do we know that Reb Shimon says that you could bring korbanos and make conditions? From the following brayse, Reb Shimon Omer lemachras maybe hashomei veloigoi imo. There's a whole big discussion in Tosfos here, and also a big Tosfos in Masechtas Zvachim about the context of this brayse for what's important for us right now. Betsim, we have a person who's a suffix mitzora, and since he's a suffix, what does a suffix mitzora do in terms of his korbanos? We know all about, thank God, Baruch Hashem, we have had the privilege to learn all about the mitzora, the purification process of mitzora. We've spent a lot of time discussing that. So we know that a mitzora, as part of at the end of his purification process, he has to bring a number of korbanos, and he can only come back in and become part of society again after having brought these korbanos. Now, what if he's a suffix mitzora? So now what happens? Because if he needs to bring, if he's a mitzora, he needs to bring an ashram. If he's not a mitzora, then he's not allowed to bring an ashram. So what do? So we say you bring, maybe ashram of a logo, bring the ashram with the log shemen ve'omer. And he says, im mitziro, if he's a mitzora, zeu ashram of zeu logo. Well, if he's a mitzora, here's the ashram, here's the logo. The imlav, and if he's not a mitzora, so what he's saying is, ashram zayeh shalmei nedava. Well, then this ashram will just be a korban shlamim, that's it. If I'm not a nazir, if I'm not a mitzora, well then this korban is not an ashram, it's a shlamim. But also ashram, and now in terms of the details of that ashram, right, that of this korban, you basically need to cover all your bases for the ashram and for the shlamim. So for example, ta'un shchita batzafid. So you do shchita in the north of the Azara, like in ashram. Ashram is kache kache. Umatim bahonis, and the blood and the oil on his bahonis, just in case he's a mitzora. V'smicha v'nesachim v'tnufas chazav ashok. Smicha nechasim nesachim v'tnufas chazav ashok, like we do by a shlamim. V'nechos zichichuna liyom v'layla, and the kohanim can eat it for one day like a ashram. Even though a shlamim would be 2 days, they eat it for 1 day. So so basically he brings this korban al tanai, and then you have to basically find the lowest common denominator of stuff. Make sure you cover all your bases for just in case it's an asham and just in case it's a shlom. Mifarek mar b'shchitas kodshim, and even though in Masechta Zvachim, when this shita was brought up, we said, wait, see this in Masechta Zvachim, it came up in the context of if a shlomim and an asham get mixed together, what do you do? And we said, wait, but maybe Emer do Amar Reb Shimon Maisi umasne lichatchila letakune gaver. Maybe when Reb Shimon says, no big deal, nish gefährlich, just bring the asham and the shlomim and make a tanai if I am a mitzvah, if I'm not a mitzvah. Maybe that's only because it's such it's such an important and you have this mitzvah. Is he allowed in the community? He's not allowed in the community. He's only going to be allowed back in the community if he's a mitzvah. If he brings this asham, this is a very important korban. So maybe in that context, Reb Shimon says, you could bring the korban al tanai because we need to allow this mitzvah to come back and be part of the community. But in general, we wouldn't just suggest that if a asham and a shlam get mixed together, right? So just bring it all tonight. But however, anemile gabe shlomim dikamemayit ba'achilason davelu kachim leveis absul. However, that rationale to say that it's only allowed by mitzvah, otherwise we wouldn't make this tanai. Well, that's specifically when you have an ashram and a shlom that get mixed together, and the problem is by just treating it like the chumras of an ashram, that means that a shlom could be eaten for 2 days, an ashram could only be eaten for 1 day. And by treating it like an asham, you are basically going to burn the meat on the next day if it becomes noser, even though if it's shlamim, you would still be able to eat it. So basically, you maybe, you're what's it called? Maybe I can't remember, but kachim levesa, maybe kachim levesa asreif or whatever. I can't remember what it is. But anyways, you're basically burning perfectly good. You're risking burning perfectly good shlamim, but that idea doesn't apply here to menachos because these are all the same menachos and they all have the same amount of time to be eaten, right? So the argument that we made in Zvachim to say that even though by a mitzvah you can make this tonight, but not in general, that's because in general you have to work. You have to be concerned about the fact that a shlam can be eaten for 2 days and you're going to be burning the meat on the second day too early. But that doesn't apply to menachos though, because menachos they're all eating the same amount of time anyways. There it is. Aval, and maybe kachma veis absul. Aval menachos, but when it comes to menachos, afilu lechatchila, you should be able to do that lechatchila and no big deal. So therefore, Abaye says that it's no problem. It should be no problem, even according to Reb Shimon, to bring just the 5 types of menachos and to make a tanai about just in case I had mentioned a custom ma'if well then the custom ma'if should be worked out with these 5 types of menachos that I'm bringing, and in case it was 7 and 3, so then count 7 of the chalas like the neder and the rest of nedava, etc., and that should be just fine since all the menachos are eaten for the same amount of time anyways, and there's no issue of being maybe kachim leveis absul or anything like that. Rab Poppe says Abaye Reb Shimon the Amar, according to Reb Shimon who says mechzer chalis umechzer kikin yavi. Reb Shimon who says, look, if you want to bring a minchas ma'if 5 chalas and 5 rakikin, gesundheit. Hakamaisi isarin echad mishnei esronis v'log echad mishnei logan. So Reb Papa asked, but wait a second. A korban mincha, minchas nedava by default, is 1 isarin and 1 log of oil. So Reb Shimon says, look, if you want to bring a minchas ma'if 5 chalas, 5 rakikin, great. Bring an isarin of flour. Half of the isarin will be for chalas, half of it will be for a kikin, right? You'll have 1 log. I guess you'll have, half a log for the chalas, half a log for the kikin. But you're bringing the mincha is 1 isarin of flour and 1 log of oil. the problem is, says Rav Papa, in this case, you're bringing, so in case he said, in case what he had said was, I'm going to bring, let's say, a minchas mai fesoner, 5 chalas, 5 rakikin. If that's what he said, what's our solution here? Well, you're bringing 5 types of minchas, of menachos. Minchas soles, minchas machbas, minchas marcheshes. And then a minchas mai fesoner with 10 chalas, and another one with 10 rakikin. And we're saying, mix and match between the two. The problem is that you're bringing 2 separate minchas and saying mix and match. So essentially what's happening is, you're mixing and matching an isaron from 2 isaron. You have these, the mincha ma'ifasana of chalas and another one of rakikin, and we're saying from among them, take 5 of the chalas and 5 of the rakikin. So we're basically combining 2 menachos into one and to create what we're looking for, but basically we're making a combination of 5 chalas and 5 rakikin we're taking from this isar and this, and from that isar and that, and from this log this, and from that log that. We're drawing out 1 isaron and 1 log from 2 isarons and 2 logs, but really what we need by mincha is to bring 1 isaron and 1 log. That's a Papa's kasha. As again, he's bringing 1 isaron from 2 isarons. V'log echad mishnei logim, but we need him to bring 1 isaron and 1 log, not 2 and then make a combination. Shaminu lele Reb Shimon the Amar, and maybe isaron echad mishnei isaronos, v'log echad mishnei login yotza. Okay, well, says the Gemara, apparently Reb Shimon is okay with that. He's okay with bringing 1 isaron from 2 isarons and 1 log from 2 logs. Okay. Fine. Rashi says he's not exactly sure where this is from. Okay. Okay, but next. But this is a bit of a hack, right? And that's what happens when you have hacks. Hacks always have side effects, right? And we're going to be chasing our tail a little bit. We're saying it's a bit of a hack to say that he's just going to bring these 5 types. One of them is going to be a maifasana with 10 chalas, one with 10 rakikin, and into what if he said 5 chalas and 5 rakikin, 7 and 3, 2 and 8, whatever it is? Well, we'll just make a tanai and say this. Okay. So he said, so our first question was, well, what about the fact that he needs to bring 1 isaron and 1 log? Well, Reb Shimon says you can bring 1 from 2 and whatever. That's okay. Next question. How do you make the komets? Usually what would happen is you bring, a minchas ma'ifesoner, you make 5 chalas, 5 rakikin, you break them up, mix them together, and you take a komets. What do you do here? You have 2 separate minchas. How does the komets work? So mekametz eichi komets. Are you separating the komets? Demas nivamer, he says, I chalis lichudayu v'rakikin lichudayu. Well, if what he had initially said was that he's going to bring 10 chalas or 10 rakikin. Well, Amr de kokamitzna mechalas lavi achalas, de kokamitzna merakikin lavi rakikin. So if he says, well, if initially I had said I'm going to bring 10 chalas, well then the komets that I'm taking from the chalas should be for my neder, for the chalas. And the komets that I'm taking from the rakikin, great, is for the 10 rakikin that I said that I'm going to bring, if that's what he said he's going to bring. Now, imechza rakikin umechza chalas. Now, if what he had said was that he's going to bring a combination of chalas and rakikin, some chalas and some rakikin. So Amri, I'm saying the kokamitzna mechalis lehave amechza chalas mechza rakikin. Well, the komets that I'm going to take for the chalas, from the chalas, right? I have these 10 chalas, I'm going to take a komets from them. Well, that should be for, I think, if I understand correctly, that should be for my combined neder, right? Because the neder is some kind of combination of chalas and rakikin. So this komets that I'm taking from the chalas should be for my combined neder. And for what I'm the komets that I'm taking from the rakikin, should be for the essentially leftover chalas and leftover rakikins, that those are going to be a nedava, and this is a komets for them. Okay. V'bai mikametz chad komets mechalas umerakikin, v'ka komets mechalas arakikin umerakikin achalas. But 1 second. Reb Shimon, who says that you can bring a minchas mai for soner, 5 chalas and 5 rakikin. So what you do is, you take the 5 chalas and the 5 rakikins, you break them up, you put them in a bowl, and from the 5 chalas and 5 rakikins, you take 1 kometz from the isaron. That's 5 of these and 5 of that. You put them all together and take 1 kometz from them. Here, you're taking a kometz from chalas and saying it should work for both. From rakikins and saying it should work from both. How does that work? Right? Because right now, he's just bringing 10 chalas. That's 1 mincha. And he's taking 10 rakikin, that's another mincha. He's taking the kometz only from the chalas and the kometz only from the rakikin. But if we're talking about combinations, don't you have to take from both? So Shamina Leila Reb Shimon, we saw Reb Shimon's shita on Daf Samach Gimel, the Amr that he says, Im komatz ve'ola biyado me'echad al shneim yotza. Well, Reb Shimon had said that if you have 5 chalas and 5 rakikin and you put them together in the bowl and you take a kometz, and the kometz consists of only the chalas, that's okay. Or only the rakikin, that's fine. You had put in the bowl from the chalas and from the rakikin, even if the kometz ended up being just one of them, it's fine. So here also, even if you took the kometz from just the chalas or just the rakikin, it is fine. Va'ika moser shemen. Next, what do you do with the leftover oil? Because when it comes to a chala, so basically, if you, according to Reb Shimon, chalas in general, right? When it comes to a minchas mai for soner of chalas, you'll take the oil and you'll mix it together with the chalas. I think it was a machlekes in the Mishnah if that is before they're baked or after they're baked. But you're going to take all the oil and you're going to mix it in with the flour. Again, I think either before. I think the Chacham said before baking. I think Rebbe had said after baking, if I'm not mistaken. But when it comes to the rakikins are like flat. They're like matzahs, I think. So there, you actually take the oil and you smear it directly onto the rakik, onto the matzah. And what do you do with the leftover oil? So you smear some of it on the matzah. What do you do with the leftovers? So in that case, you don't put it back into the chalas. Rather, where am I? Fine. Va'ika, the Moshe Hashem, what do you do with the leftover oil from the rakikin? So now if you have 5 chalas and 5 rakikin, so you're going to mix half of the oil with the chalas, half of the oil for the rakikin, but you're only smearing some of it on the rakikin. What do you do with the rest of it? The mechza chalos umechza rakikin amar moser Hashem and machzir lechalos. So if it's 5 chalos and 5 rakikin, so the remainder of the oil after they've been smeared on the rakikin, well, by mechza chalos mechza rakikin, you'll take those and you put them with the chalos. However, ikulu rakikin, but when it's 10 rakikin, so you take the oil, you smear it on the rakikin, and the rest of it, it goes to the Kohanim. So what do you do in this case when you don't know what you specified? What happens to the Moser Hashemin? Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, well, it will be like Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, the son of Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Omer says Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Reb Shimon, in the name of Reb Shimon, Moshchon kimin ki u'Moser Hashemin el Kohanim. That, well, you anoint it on the, you smear it on the Rikikin, like the letter, like this Greek letter ki, and then after that, whatever's left over, you give to the Kohanim. So whether that is entirely chalas, whether it's entirely rakikin or 50% chalas, 50% rakikin, whatever the leftover oil is from the rakikin, you will give to the Kohanim. So that is what you would do. So Abaye says that you can explain that even according to Reb Shimon, who has his combinations of chalas and rakikin, you can still say that you'll just take 5 korban minchas, and that would cover all of your bases. Friends, that was Daf Kufei of Masechta Menachos. On Daf Kufei of Masechta Menachos, we began the 13th parak of Masechta Menachos, and really, it was a pretty technical daf that talked about just different combinations of menachos. If you said, I'm going to bring a mincha, what does that mean? How many menachos? What types of menachos? And we, of course, got into the end this big conversation about if he says that he's going to bring, he doesn't remember what type of mincha he said, so how many can he bring? Can it be like Reb Shimon? What about the combinations? And we got into all sorts of stuff. Abaye essentially said, yeah, it could be even like Reb Shimon. Anyways, friends, that was Daf Kufei of Masechta Menachos. We're almost getting close to the end over here. I will catch you tomorrow for Daf Kuf Vav of Masechta Menachos. Have a great day. Cheers.